Okay.
Good morning, friends, and welcome to the United Lodge of Theosophists in the Washington, D.C. area. There's a declaration to the United Lodge of Theosophists, and I'm going to read it now. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise, be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. So we welcome everyone today. There's going to be a talk on theosophy in America and the Brotherhood of Adepts and the founding of America. And I'll do a quick reading from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4. Krishna is speaking. Both I and thou have passed through many births, O harasser of thy foes. Mine are known unto me, but thou knowest not of thine. Even though myself unborn of changeless essence and the Lord of all existence, yet in presiding over nature, which is mine, I am born but through my own Maya, the mystic power of self-ideation, the eternal thought and the eternal mind. I produce myself among creatures, O son of Bharata, whenever there is a decline of virtue and an insurrection of vice and injustice in the world. And thus I incarnate from age to age for the preservation of the just, the destruction of the wicked, and the establishment of righteousness. Whoever, O Arjuna, knoweth my divine birth and actions to be even so, doth not upon quitting his mortal frame enter into another, for he entereth into me. Many who were free from craving, fear, and anger, filled with my spirit, and who depended upon me, having been purified by the ascetic fire of knowledge, have entered into my being. In whatever way men approach me, in that way do I assist them. But whatever the path takes by mankind, that path is mine also, O son of Pritha. And now we'll have our talk.
Good morning, friends. And today's talk will be on roots of American liberty to celebrate the 4th of July weekend. And I think the celebrations already ended for many of us, but this is the Sunday following the 4th of July. And in the tradition of the
Un traficante del lado oeste que de varios homicidios.
we will have a talk on the roots of American liberty. There is a lot to speak of, And I will start probably with a non-sectarian, non-esoteric, and non-religious roots of American liberty. And then we will come to a more esoteric and more theosophical influences and the work of adepts in influencing the founding fathers of American liberty and American state. So some of the non-esoteric roots, the first one is to speak of is the classical foundations in the American liberty and Declaration of Independence and Constitution, and that's influence of Greece and Rome, and specifically of Athenian democracy, and Athenian democracy known as to be one of the first democratic city-states that had all the democratic principles that later got embedded in democracies of the West. And the second one is the Roman republicanism. Again, the establishment of representation in the government structure that basically would be the first in the history known to us. There may have been other democratic states prior, but this is the democratic principles and institutions that influenced at least Western democracies and Western statehood. Again, when we look at Athenian and Roman democracies, there were what is called the ethno-ethics, ethno-focused. So this was the democracy for the city of Athens. It wasn't democracy for the entire ancient world or for the Greece. There was the Spartan world that was, the city of Sparta was run very differently, and there was the city of Athens that adopted these democratic principles. Same for the Roman republicanism. This was for the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire included lots of land and lots of people and lots of other states. But again, this was just for the Roman Empire and for those privileged in the Roman Empire to represent the Roman Empire in the state. And we will see some of the similarities also in the history of American statehood. The second influencing factor was the Judeo-Christian moral order that was brought by lots of Christian groups, Christian both sects and established churches that moved to at that time to the colonies in the Americas. One group that the student wants to draw attention to is the Puritans. The Puritans were really foundational in settling America, in influencing American ideology and way of living. But there is something interesting to see that it is a little bit over two sides of the coin, because Puritans were certainly fleeing persecutions. They were seeking spiritual freedom. But it's always perceived they came straight to England and they settled in Americas. Actually not. They were seeking religious freedom from the persecutions in England. And they came to Netherlands. That was their first home base. And they were seeking the religious freedoms in Netherlands. And in fact, they became so, they became such as zealots about their way of worship that they annoyed the whole Dutch society. Because Dutch were very, very accepting, very tolerant. It was one of the most tolerant societies in Europe. And the Dutch could not take Puritans anymore. And they basically started reacting to their zealousy to convert everyone and to enforce their way of living on the Dutch society. That was very intolerant and very unaccepting, in fact. So the departing point of the Puritans from Netherlands was from the port of Rotterdam, where they went to seek the new land, where basically there will be no one who could in any way limit their way they're pursuing the religion and the worship of God. So when they came to America, they of course retained their Puritan strong ideas on how society should be run, how it should be embedded with the religion. And it is interesting to acknowledge now from the perspective of history how the founding fathers saw, and it's just an example of Puritans. There are many other groups who were moving with the same intent, that they have foreseen that basically those who are seeking freedom will limit the freedom in America. So we will return to this in the ideas of secularism that was brought to us by Thomas Paine, and you have the picture, we have this picture here, we'll come back to him. So this is the influence of the Judeo-Christian moral order, and the third non-esoteric influence on American liberty will come from Magna Carta and English common law tradition that was still retained in the basis of our legal traditions and legal structures. The Magna Carta gave us the gift of due process, trial by a jury, and protection from unlawful imprisonment. All of the things that now we are upholding strongly. And over the centuries, English common law evolved also a tradition of individual rights, of property protection, and of the local self-government. So these traditions are coming from the 1215 from Magna Carta and the British common law. The fourth influence that is non-esoteric is coming from the Age of Enlightenment and natural rights philosophy, and they've been brought by John Locke and by Montesquieu. John Locke basically was the one who reinforced and brought into the light the ideas of value of life, value of liberty, and of property, and that is inherent to all human beings and should be granted by the rulers to its citizens. So it basically assumed the rights of citizens to protect their rights to life, liberty, and property vis-a-vis any government. Montesquieu contributed to the ideas of separation of power to prevent tyranny, and we'll talk more about Thomas Paine, who really brought it to the forefront of both American Revolution and French Revolution. And the last principle was the colonial self-government that was part of the American experience. Since there was not, the British rule was still far away, the economies were very self-organized. So there was a lot of tradition and power given to the local self-government due to the remoteness of the American colonies and also remoteness of settlements in the Americas. And now we'll move closer to spiritual roots of American liberty. And one of the greatest theosophists, that is Thomas Paine. And in the series of the great theosophists that was published in the Theosophy magazine, he is basically listed among Jesus Christ and Plato and other great theosophists, because he really embodied the ideas of theosophy and brought it into the foundation of American statehood. So the spiritual dimension of Thomas Paine, and we're not going to go over again his biography. We've said there is a lot to be said of him. There is 3 countries that would give him probably honorary citizenship, and we'll be happy to call him his own, and that would be United States, France, and Britain, where he contributed greatly to both the British thought, to American Revolution, and to the French Revolution. His, I would say, 3 main writings were the Common Sense, that basically called the colonies to independence. The second one that influenced French Revolution was The Right of Man. And the one that brought to this secularism and establishment of secular state in America and also in European states was The Age of Reason. And it's really fascinating to read today Age of Reason, actually to take the writings of Thomas Paine and read it from today. And even in today's context, they're quite amazing and quite enlightening. Even though we believe we live in a secular state, rereading Thomas Paine really helps to realize that we don't. So a little bit about the Age of Reason. This is where Thomas Paine basically aligned the esoteric understanding of one life, that there is one life behind all existence. And it should be treated as one with due respect, and that should be the foundation of American society, bringing many into oneness. And when we read the many in one, pluribus unum, we understand it in a more exoteric way often, basically the multiple states in one nation, but the esoteric meaning of this is actually much deeper. Pluribus unum means all of us, all of those who built American state was being one. Whoever they were, they could have been in the early days Irish, they could have been later Japanese, they could be today Latin American. This is the pluribus unum. It's not the states, it's the people, because the states are composed of people, and at the end, it's not about the structures of statehood, but of the people who live in the structures. So this is what he was speaking in the Law of Reason. It's basically one life. The other main theme of his work is the importance of moral duty. And in the moral duty, even when he was asked about his own religion or of his main philosophical positions, his response was that the world is my country and doing good is my religion. That he considered that there is no religion above truth. This is what we have in our main sort of principles as theosophy. There is no religion above truth, and the truth is serving unity of humanity and unity of all beings. So this is what he professed at his best, of basically saying that his religion is doing good by everyone and towards everyone. And the last theme that is running throughout his writings is the universal brotherhood. And again, we hear this, and this is like, to us as theosophists, it may sound very familiar to say that the world is my country. But looking at 1700s, of somebody saying that the world is my country, that was unheard of. So this was probably one of the first statements of this kind. And this is what he was proposing, to build a country on the basis of that, where you are not looking for the benefit of one country, where you're seeing yourself as part of the whole. And this is why making America great again means making America great again on the foundation that is based on unity, bringing all of the people residing here and treating them as one, and seeing America as part of the one linked ecosystem of the brotherhood of humanity, and world being the country. So this is what the founding fathers were intending, and we'll go deeper into the documents where they have left it for us to follow. But before that, let's go over maybe the main points of Thomas Paine and compare them to the theosophical teachings to summarize his impact and his influence on American thought that led to the Declaration of Independence and setting up the document of Constitution and Declaration of Independence that's guiding us until today. So the Thomas Paine's views on the divine unity, on divinity. He believed in one principle, one God. He did not, again, he did not believe in a personal God, but he believed that there is one deity, one principle that is a creator of all, but he rejected all dogmatic religions. So he did not believe in separation of humanity by the lines of religion. And the theosophical teaching, we believe in one absolute, one unknowable, universal divine principle that is behind all manifestation. So we just put a different language, maybe more broad language, to what Paine was writing in the Age of Reason. The second principle is brotherhood of man. Paine advocated the universal rights and brotherhood across nations. And again, that was beyond revolutionary for his time. He, in fact, advocated for end of slavery. He was very harsh on the existence of the slavery in the Americas. He also advocated for the rights of women, and he even advocated for the rights of animals. So it doesn't get any more theosophical than that. So those were his views on the brotherhood of man and animals, basically all living beings. And this is what Theosophy holds as one of its main principles of universal brotherhood as the first object of Theosophy. And this is what we're all striving to achieve. This is what we do following the teaching of Theosophy. And the third one is the reason and his belief in reason. And reason also we will see as a theme in both Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, the Knolls. And he believed in reason. This is why he basically called his book The Age of Reason. And reason to him was basically not accepting any dogma, but evaluating anything that we see in front of us with the reason, with our own lens. And that lens of the reason was, does it serve the brotherhood of man? So that was the reason lens that he was applying to all what was happening around him. And this is what we also do in Theosophy. We value reason and spiritual intuition and apply it to everything that we read, even from Theosophical writings. The next one is rejection of dogma, and that was clear that he did not denounce all the priestcraft, miracles, superstitions. He called for separation of religion and state because he perceived that this will be happening specifically in America due to the flight of the many religious groups seeking non-persecution. And the same we do in Theosophy. We basically oppose the dogma, superstition, and seek for the inner truth as the independent students of Theosophy. So our independent search and convictions and understanding. He also believed in spiritual evolution, and he focused on social and moral progress more rather than the personal spiritual evolution. He is not known to be associated with any of the esoteric orders formally. So he was not a Freemason, but he definitely was guided by the invisible hand of the adepts. And there may be much not known about him, about his esoteric connections, because as we say, the master who says I am the master is probably not the master. But those who never mentioned this most likely had the connections and were in contact with the adepts. And in Theosophy, we focus more on the inner soul evolution, and that is governed by karma, and through that contributing to the building of a better society. The next, we will talk about, to finalize on Thomas Paine. He was, if one could say, a karmic catalyst in two revolutions, in French and in American. He was a controversial figure. He was both loved and ostracized. But again, even today, when one will pick up his book and read his views, they are truly out of the box, even for us. That we often think that this is how we live, but when we examine our structures and our life, it's not often so. So now we will move to the next group that had a great impact on roots of the liberty and the American statehood, and this is the Freemasonry. This is the invisible hand that was guiding our founding fathers through not so invisible Freemasons, one of whom is very, very well known, that's Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was a Grand Master of the French Lodge of the Nine Sisters and was deeply involved in Masonic affairs in both America and France. Also through the hand of George Washington. George Washington was initiated in 1752, and he belonged to Fredericksburg Lodge, and later presided over the ceremonies of public buildings, including U.S. Capitol. So he was a well-known Mason. The other Freemasons that are known to be Freemasons, there is a document that exists on their affiliation. was Paul Revere. Again, no surprises here. Paul Revere is something the student just learned through this talk. It's quite fascinating that he was also part of the Freemasons. John Hancock, James Monroe, and possibly Alexander Hamilton, but that is not known, Alexander Hamilton. And the last one to be mentioned, there is no hard proof of membership, but most likely, since it comes through the writings and through lots of personal affiliations, that was Thomas Jefferson. And when we look at the Freemasons' influence on the founding of America, it is even in our seal, in our architecture. So it speaks from the, as the Freemasons will be proud to admit, it speaks through the stones, as they were initially the Guild of Masons. So let's see how the Freemasonry in the establishment of the United States speaks through the stones. So this is the main circles in Washington, D.C., Dupont, Logan Circle, Mount Vernon Square, and Washington Circle, and with the last being the White House. So this is a perfect pentagram. And the pentagram in Freemasonry, basically the deeper meaning of the pentagram is as above, so below, or the evolution of the matter into the spirit. So we also have it on our Theosophical seal, where we have two triangles, one white triangle descending into the dark triangle, and this is basically symbolizing the descent of the spirit into the matter, and also saying as above, so below. And we will see more of the statement as above, so below in the United States seal. It's also on the downward side that says the heavens approve. So as above, so below. The heavens approve, meaning that the way the spiritual world is established will establish the same world on earth, and that will begin with the United States. And this is represented in the bottom, the Novus Ordo Seclorum, and that basically says the establishment of the new order. It does not get any more esoteric than this, and this is really in the hands of every American today. We will look at it every day, and we don't think what it may mean, but it means basically as above, so below, and here on earth in the United States, we will be establishing a new world order that will be, so to say, blessed by the heavens, and then by the heavens and by the all-seeing eyes. And all-seeing eye is both the symbol of Freemasons, and it's also a symbol of Rosicrucians. That basically represents the one absolute, the first principle, the logos. You can take it down to any level, to the divine in the Christian theology that is overseeing this creation. Now, it is very interesting to connect the establishment of the New World Order to the statements of Thomas Paine that the world is my country. So this is the New World Order, world being your country, of establishing a new country based on people coming from different parts of the world. So this is the Freemason influence, and to mention some of the main Masonic ideas that influenced our statehood. The first one, again, it will resonate with Thomas Paine and his writings, and that's equality of all men and all brethren. So this is reflected in the Declaration, in assertion that all men are created equal, and it really meant all humans. Yeah, this is what the founding fathers and the elders who influenced them meant in the Declaration. So this is the equality of all human beings, or all who reside in the country. The second Masonic idea that found its way into the First Amendment is the liberty of conscience and thought. This is also the theosophical idea of the inner man, and the evolution of inner man. That is not a right. This is given state, because you cannot evolve as an inner person if you are limited in your self-expressions. So the third one is the government as a rationally constructed edifice. That it is actually, and this is taking us to the pyramid. The government being a carefully constructed edifice brick by brick. And for the Freemasons, and the pyramid was, again, the evolution of inner man, evolution of state. It is building, it's the masonry. It's building the higher order of things, brick by brick, of evolving to the higher states. And here we can see that the pyramid is not finished. And certainly in 1700s, it was not finished yet. And it's hard to say that they foresee to be finished in 200 years, that was just the reflection where they saw the state where it was just starting. Or if to look at it more esoterically, it is never finished. Because there is really never the, just like the absolute, there is not the boundary of perfection and evolution, there is no the end to it. We don't know in how many manvantaras it will evolve, and where does it begin and where does it end. So the pyramid is never finished. It's always a process of evolving to a higher and higher states. And this is what they exemplified in the back of the American seal. And the one additional Masonic principle that made its way is basically the principle of the moral self-governance. And again, the moral self-governance was overlaying over the structures that were established in colonial America of self-governance, because there was really no other way but to self-govern because of the distances from the Britain and distances between the colonial settlements. And this is also part of the Freemasons' ideals of building the temple that is not made with hands, but made by each individual that is putting the bricks of their higher consciousness in the structures. So, and now we'll go to even more interesting group that did not have its hand in any visible structures of the American foundations or foundations of American liberty, but it truly permeates the ideology and the thought climate in which American state was born. And this tradition is Rosicrucians. Rosicrucians was an esoteric group that was established formally in 1700, but existed definitely before and links to the source of the wisdom religion. It came about in Europe and influenced all European states through truly invisible hand. There was even stipulations that Rosicrucians ever existed, or there was just a manifesto. But Rosicrucians never had any political presence. Never really, their societies were not well documented, membership not known, but they acted as an invisible hand in bringing about brotherhood of humanity. And just to summarize the Rosicrucian philosophy in one symbol, and it is in their name and is also in their symbol. And this is not a very good picture, but here it is. So Rosicrucians means Rosen cross, cross with the rose. So we have the cross and we have the rose. And that's all what they were about. Now, what does it really mean? The cross is matter. So this is the material man. This is the Jesus basically on the cross. This is the crucifixion of the matter. And this is the material world with all of its treacherous challenges that we are going through. This is our material presence. The rose is the spirit. This is the sort of our spiritual aspect that rises above matter. And the rose goes from the bottom and sort of stretches to the sky on the cross. And this is the evolution of the man that is actually possible only in the material. This is why we reincarnate and they go through this material over and over, because we cannot evolve in the other states of consciousness and states of being. We can evolve only through the reincarnation in this material plane that presents us the challenges and the tasks that we have to go through. So this is what Rosicrucians believe, that basically their esoteric school was teaching how this, and it was based on lots of Christian mysticism, on alchemy, and alchemy, of course, not understood as the alchemy of metals, but the alchemy of the spirit, of transmuting the inner self. So they were very active in Europe at that time. Again, there is no linkages between any of the founding fathers and Rosicrucians. There are actually no linkages between Rosicrucians and any political powers. They were the invisible hand. But when we look at what they believed and their symbols, they're also very present in both Freemasonry and in the principles of our liberty and our statehood. So the first one we went over already, the rose and the cross, that represents spiritual regeneration through sacrifice, inner alchemy, and rising out of the material and growing with the spirit. The all-seeing eye is also a Rosicrucian symbol, and it symbolizes for Rosicrucians the ever-watchful divine wisdom and awakened inner sight of the true initiate. So it's not necessarily, it's basically, it is divine, but the God is in us. So it's our own higher self and our own watchful inner eye that is watching over what we're constructing and what we're doing. Interesting enough, the unfinished pyramid is also present in Rosicrucian symbology, and it exemplifies the great work. Basically, humanity's gradual building a temple of perfected society, brick by brick, through moral and spiritual strivings. And the other symbol that is very prominent in both Rosicrucian thought and in the American symbols is the rays of light. And we see them in many different religious representations, the esoteric and exoteric groups. And that basically reflects spiritual aspirations, and again, spirit permeating the matter. We'll go a little bit over the comparing both Rosicrucian and Freemasonry and the theosophical thought on a few main principles. The first one is the views of liberty. How did Rosicrucians view liberty and how Freemasons view liberty? For Rosicrucians, liberty was an inner spiritual emancipation from ignorance and world's passion. And it was the outer freedom that should be protected and expressed. So very similar to Freemasonry, but again, the Rosicrucians were more about the inner man, and they were not actively engaged in political affairs or statehood. For Freemasonry, this was more of a civil and moral freedom to pursue the ways of life that were based on virtue and aspiring to create the brotherhood of man. On the moral law, Rosicrucians believed in nature and the man that has to harmonize their actions with the nature and with the cosmic order through the alchemy of their soul. So again, it was very esoteric and very inner focused. And the Freemasons took it to the more of a moral law that is put into the building tools of social structures and building the temple of society. In regard to brotherhood, the Rosicrucians believed in enlightened souls of the inner soul of each person working in secret, and only in secret. That's why we don't know who they were, where they were represented, building the world spiritual uplift. The main belief was the world spiritual regeneration and building of the brotherhood of man through that spiritual regeneration achieved through an inner man. So very, very resonating with theosophy. And the Freemasons believed in more of a visible fraternity of man that was bound by oath rituals that would work towards the betterment of man and building a better society. And now the ultimate goal of the books for the Rosicrucians, it was already mentioned, spiritual regeneration of mankind and preparation for universal reformation of religion, science, and government. And for Freemasons was construction of the symbolic temple of humanity that was built on justice, on liberty, on expression of the inner man, and brotherhood. Now, there were some groups that were probably linked to Rosicrucians, and they were mostly present in Philadelphia. So actually not that far from where we can find some of the roots of Rosicrucians that were creating that ideal climate for the ideology that permeated through the early American society. And one place we can visit today, it is the Euphrates Cloister in Pennsylvania. It's really actually a fascinating place. It's open now to visitors. It was mostly the men who were the monks residing there, but it was not any religious order or a Christian group. It was very different for many of them. They were Christian celibate mystical community of monks that blended both alchemy, Rosicrucian ideas, moral purity, and they also embedded music. They would play, all of them were playing musical instruments, and music was permeating through all of their worship. And the second group was Johann Kelpius and the Hermits of the Wissahickon. They arrived to Pennsylvania in 1694, and they were looking to build the new spiritual age. They practiced meditation, astrology, also music, and studied many secret texts in the forest retreats. So most likely they did come from Europe. Most likely they were somehow connected to Rosicrucians, or in spirit or in real associations. Again, Rosicrucian order was fairly secret, and we don't know their membership. When we look at all of these influences, starting with the more of a exoteric, such as the Greco-Roman tradition, the Magna Carta, then looking at the great thinkers such as John Locke, Montesquieu, and Thomas Paine, and then going into the esoteric traditions that were guided by the adepts such as Freemasonry and Rosicrucians, the impact on America, we can see it through the writings of Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the building of our capital city, the United States seal, and our dollar sign. But looking at all of this, what does it actually mean in practice? What does it mean for us today? There is also interesting parallels with the teachings of ethics. And the ethics basically teaches us that there are three types of ethics. Actually, there are four types of ethical behavior. First one is ego ethics, and this is the ethics of the well-balanced, selfish person who does ethical things. Basically, don't do to your neighbor what you don't want to do to yourself. This is ego ethics. I don't want to suffer. I will do good to you so you can return the benefit to me. But it's very egocentric. The second one is considered to be ethno-ethics. Ethno-ethics is very similar to ego ethics, but your ego is expanded to your ethnicity or to your religion. So as a Christian community, or as a Buddhist community, or as a Muslim community, we will do ethical things to each other. But that does not apply to others. If you don't believe in Jesus, you're not going to go to heaven. If you are not part of the Muslim community, our laws of ethics don't apply. We can treat you differently. So this is ethno-ethics on religious basis, or same on the national basis. That if we all belong to this ethnical group, we apply ethno-ethics to this group. We all belong to this nation. We treat this nation, our nation, as such, but everyone else can be treated differently. So this is the ethno-ethics. Then there is integrational ethics, when you're integrating more to have sort of win-win with different groups. And then there is the universal ethics that all of us are striving, and this is what we truly want to achieve. This is the universal brotherhood that basically takes you out of the ethnical or religious or affiliation group that we belong to and applies the same rules of behavior to anyone in the world. And if we look at the history of humanity and we look at the ethics today, we're still so much bound by this ethnical limitations that we still tend to treat people who belong to our group, and we can also call it in a bad name of tribalism, well, and others, that doesn't matter so much. Maybe if we have extra moment or resources, but these other people, they're other. What theosophy is really calling for, and what the founding fathers and the adepts that guided our founding fathers called for, is for that universal ethics, where we are bringing the same ethical principles to all humanity, to all residing in our country, and to all different ways of worship and belief. And this is what was at the foundation. If to summarize all of this invisible hands, this is what our founding fathers, guided by adepts, were trying to achieve. They were trying to achieve a new order of the ages that are not based on ethno-ethics, where we'll just defend us being great and others not being so great, but really bringing the world together on the foundation of this country to then extend to the rest of the world. And this is what remains so special about founding of America, and maybe this is why adepts also guided HPB to come to this country and start her work here, that this was put in the foundation, and that remains the guiding light and the principle that we all aspire to create. So this will conclude this talk, and we can go to any questions.
Can you think of off the top of your head any other societies aside from Athens or Atlantis that had the idea of universal brotherhood before the US was founded?
There were some groups within societies.
Sure.
But again, like if I would say they all still were bound by what's called ethnoetics, that this is just brotherhood for these groups. If anybody can think of something, I don't know. They're still stuck in this question. This is why it was so special, because really they were ideal that were born fairly recently.
We know theosophically that movements, ideas go in cycles, and so I don't know, do you think that the puritanical cycle is sort of come back, where there is like a tribalism and nowadays?
This is a very interesting question. This brings back one of the lines that Thomas Paine wrote, that we would not have liberty without tyranny. For us to see the light, there has to be darkness, so we can contrast. To have the liberty, you need to know what is the tyranny. And it is the cycles when we immerse deeper into the matter, in the sort of more Puritan thought, that then lead us to the cycle of rebouncing into more spiritual and more of the theosophical ideas. So this is also the statement that out of the greatest darkness comes greatest light.
So.
Yes, definitely. They were definitely on the downward cycle of understanding the universal brotherhood.
Also, to your point, it's a wise observation. Matter naturally goes through stages of separateness and togetherness.
Mm-hmm.
Matter becomes separate, we become separate from everything, and then we become together with everything. And I think the same happens with our societies, our ideas. There are these moments of great convergence where we're all kind of on the same page. There's also moments of great separateness.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes like, yay.
Yeah, I think of it as a boiling pot, and stuff rises to the surface temporarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Puritans they're mad. They didn't get their way when they came here. Like 200 years later, we're gonna get it. We're gonna get it.
But they came to Netherlands. Actually, I had luck to stand at the port where they deported. They still have like a museum for Puritans and basically a museum on good riddance.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
This is
Because the Dutch were so upset at what was happening, they accepted them from the persecution, and they were so happy they could provide the aid. And then they started enforcing on the Dutch that they're not living correctly.
It's funny.
And then the Dutch said, no, you can do this to us, and they deported from the Rotterdam.
This is a pattern, perhaps, that when you say that you're going to be universal and you're going to be accepting and you're going to be tolerant, that this eventually meets whatever culture it is, eventually meets their Puritans. They meet some group that tests that tolerance so much. People were tolerant of the Nazis for a while.
Yes.
They were just like, the United States took a very, that's a European problem, and until we were confronted with it violently. So it reminds me of this idea, out above, so below, that there's this war in heaven, and that there's, a war of good and evil here, and it's only through the influence within a community, like the Order of the Oppressed or whatever, where there's some foothold that the ideas can take, and it tips the scales in some way. It just creates some kind of center of energy or center of work that allows the adepts, the Mahatmas, to have a greater influence, and that goes in cycles.
Doesn't it rely on real people, like these people that were mentioned, like Thomas Paine, were really philosophers. They really wanted to. So I think it can't gain ground unless there's like people thinking along those lines and willing to promote those ideas.
Yeah. While preparing for the talk, the student was thinking that it's easy to say that the founding fathers knew what we should be doing, that gave us the foundations, and then we are failing. Actually, it's easy to have the vision, it's hard to implement it, and we should be also a little softer on ourselves because we got the hard job. They envisioned it, they left, and then implementation of it was left with people who have very, very vague blueprint of how it's done. So it's easy to envision, but implementing is really hard. And also I think the Puritan story is so good because when the Puritans came, then there was Thomas Paine, there were the founding fathers who established that no, there will be secularization. You can't enforce what you did in Netherlands. But then again, thinking of what the previous comment was, how many more Puritans came to America after that? And they tried to convert the society to principles that were opposing, and then there was a pushback. And sometimes that pushback is stronger than it's needed. So it's almost like never-ending balancing act. And it's almost like all of us need to have checks and balances within ourselves when we overreact and when we are pushing back for a good reason, because many more Puritans will be seeking freedom and then impose their own zealous ideas on the society. It's not a black and white matter.
There's something about what you said, though, that maybe there weren't states that had universal brotherhood as their founding principle, but there were groups within those states that did. And wasn't that what America was, just a state within the world? It says New Order for North America. No, it doesn't say North America. It doesn't say New Order for the New World. It says New Order for the ages. Right?
Yes.
It's a new order for everybody. It's a new world order. So they were intending this to be a community within a larger community that has this as a founding principle, and in time, I suppose the hope is that it translates into our global society. So even these smaller groups within larger states, hopefully they are going to have that influence. And in as much as they can be true to their own principles, they get the assistance of the Mahatmas. They're aided in having that influence. It always meets challenges.
Then the separate interesting article that was in front of me was on the 5 species of humans that were just Homo sapiens, one of the Dravidians, one of the Neanderthals, and there were 3 more. And we're the only ones who survived. So we are one ethnicity. We are one. We are not separate because we're the only one of the groups that survived, whether we are the ones who killed all the other groups or because we were more adaptable, nobody will know. But if we look from the ethnocentric approach, we're the one who survived, and now we subdivided ourselves to, again, maybe for one to survive, so maybe in the future cycles, just one of all of our groups will survive, and then again will subdivide itself to. It seems to be counterproductive towards our survival as a species, but again, our survival as a species in our eyes is a goal, but from the perspective of the theosophy and the cycles, it's just one event that will unfold as it unfolds, as it to be preserved, fought, or strive for.
Cells divide before they grow.
Mm-hmm.
They divide.
Yeah,
grow,
yeah.
and divide.
Almost like similar to cancer, no?
Well, cancers grow the same way any other cells grow.
Yeah.
They just do it.
It divides,
progressively.
yeah. And then it kills the one
Right.
who causes it.
But then the new thing is the one. So it goes.
So it goes.
So it goes.
So it goes.
Would you call Thomas Paine like a genius?
He was definitely genius. I believe he was guided. Well, yes, there were many other people like John Locke and Montague sort of hitting on the similar topics. But Thomas Paine, to say that whole world is my country, it just gives you bumps. When the African people were not even considered people at that time. And just his life journey of being, to me, why he was guided, like how as a human being, you can end up in the 2 crucial events of the century that actually impact humanity going forward, the French Revolution and the American Revolution. He was in both.
The same movement.
Yeah, yeah, same. And from the readings, it looks like he was brought to the United States by Benjamin Franklin. That they were close, and it is at the Franklin's invitation he came here.
Yeah, I heard there is some sort of like, not a big monument, but where he lived in England before he left. Thomas Paine, there's like some memorial to him. Because what he did in America was so amazing. They were like, oh, that was that guy. We should
Supposedly,
live here.
his remains were to be sent back to his place of birth, but from what I've seen in the reading, the bones disappeared. Well, nobody who, why, but his remains disappeared and wound back to be. Like, how is that even possible? So also quite interesting, because the remains are in front of our eyes.
Right.
Yeah,
This
this
is his word, his ideas to remain. Yeah, truly amazing.
He was a theosophist without having heard the word theosophy.
Yes. And again, so interesting to again see the theosophical movement starting here in America, guided by the heavens, new order of the ages, and
Theosophists are a community within a larger community.
Yeah, and it started right after the Civil War too, like a big time of change.
and on the thought of we need more of the guidance now, we need more than our structures. But as one of the comments went, maybe we don't, maybe we are in a more decentralized way, the way it was in the earlier communities, when each one of us is the agent of change. And if we look in the systems thinking, the systems that are highly centralized and organized, they are prone to failure. And the system of our governance is very structured and organized. And it's great if it functions, but if it stops functioning in one node, it will basically pull the whole system down. But in a highly decentralized systems, it's very hard to take the system down because it is everywhere. One goes out, the other has to function because they're not centralized and locked in one sort of master switch. So maybe we're going back to all being agents of change and being guided in a decentralized way to bring about the ideals of the adepts that guided our founding fathers through. And we always wonder what will be the talk next year. what will be reflecting from our our journey through the cross.
Assuming free thoughts are even allowed. Still have access to the
Yeah.
internet to be able to post.
Yeah.
I think theosophy will be safe for a long time. Safe for a long time.
So, Cyrus, thank you. We can stop recording and we'll close the session because nobody